to the United States. Former President and 2024 presidential hopeful Donald Trump has signalled his intention to appeal the verdict yesterday in a civil court that found him guilty of sexual assault and defamation. A New York jury found he'd molested former magazine columnist eNCA in 1996 and then defamed her for calling her a liar. He's been ordered to pay her the equivalent of over 90 million rand in damages. The 9 jurors rejected Carroll's accusations of rape, but unanimously upheld her other complaints. And I'm joined now by our New York correspondent, William Denselow. William, thank you so much for joining us. So Donald Trump is going to appeal this. Has he given any indication on what grounds?
Well, we've heard plenty from Donald Trump since that verdict was handed down. He took to Truth Social, his social media platform, shortly after the verdict on Tuesday afternoon here in New York, and he said it was a con job. He said it was a hoax. He said that he'd never met eNCA. He's continued that line of rhetoric on Truth Social this Wednesday in a video statement he released on social media and a number of posts where he said that it was a rigged hoax. He described it as a travesty of justice. He said the verdict was a disgrace. He added that he is hopeful that justice will be served on an appeal. Now, when it comes to what grounds there could be, well, he gave some indication when he said a few hours before the verdict was handed down, just before the jury really started deliberating on Tuesday, where he said he wasn't given the right to defend himself during this civil case. Now, that isn't true. He said a few days before that it would be likely that he would make an appearance at court. He had the opportunity to testify if he wanted. He chose not to appear in court. His legal team didn't mount a defence of their own. Instead, they were very much hoping that the jury wouldn't find E.G. Carroll's testimony credible. Of course, that was ultimately not the case. And as he rightly mentioned, the jury siding that they believed that E.G. Carroll was sexually abused in the changing rooms of Bergdorf Goodman, the department store in Manhattan in the mid-1990s, also siding with Carroll that she was defamed by Donald Trump.
Is there anything legally that will now stand in his way? Is there anything legal that says someone who's convicted in a civil court cannot run for president?
There isn't. So essentially, Donald Trump is free to continue his bid for the presidency. But what needs to be considered is obviously the political weight of this verdict by the jury. Of course, we've heard from several prominent Republicans, including former governor of Arkansas, Asa Hutchinson, who says that this is another example of the indefensible behaviour of Donald Trump. Interestingly, we've also heard from former Vice President Mike Pence speaking on NBC News. He said he never witnessed or heard of any kind of behaviour of that nature when he was working alongside Donald Trump in the White House. But he said that will ultimately be a question for the American people. Of course, Donald Trump has strongly made the case and made the argument that the justice system has been weaponized by the Democrats to thwart his re-election campaign. So the real question going forward is, will enough of his supporters buy that rhetoric? Will he be able to convince enough independents, or will many Americans that were perhaps on the fence about voting for him in the next election, will this sway them to not vote for him, considering this outcome? Of course, this is one of a number of lawsuits that the former president faces. Of course, just here in Lower Manhattan, we know that we have seen an indictment against Donald Trump on allegations that he paid hush money to the porn star Stormy Daniels. Now, that is a different case. That is a federal case. But that also, if he were to be found guilty, would also not stop him from running for president. But of course, what ultimately it boils down to is how much political baggage can the former president afford to add on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, William Denselow, coming to us live from New York. And as we have seen in the past, Donald Trump says it's a witch hunt. He says things that aren't necessarily true. I didn't get a chance to testify. In fact, he elected not to testify in the civil case, as William's explained. And it seems his supporters just buy into what he's saying. So one wonders if he will be successful to become that Republican candidate for the next presidential elections. Stranger things have happened.